Hi, I'm Belinda Friezer and I'm presenting to you today from Sydney, Australia. I will be talking to you about the research conducted as part of my recently completed PhD study, which examined how infants behave with one another in similar aged peer groups in long day care across the first 2 years of life. Now, before I talk about the research, I would like to introduce you to the authors of this presentation. Here you can see me on the left of your screen, and beside me are my two co-authors, Professor Linda Harrison and Dr. Sheena Elwick. Both Linda and Sheena were my PhD supervisors and were closely involved in the research that I will discuss today. Now, research shows that infants have the capacity to interact in similar age peer groups in both laboratory and early childhood education and care settings. The laboratory-based research provides detailed descriptions of infants' behaviour under the age of 12 months in groups of 3 and 4. Early childhood education and care research provides detailed descriptions of infants' behaviour over the age of 12 months in group care settings. Now, prior research has mostly focused on describing infants' behaviour in similar age peer groups across brief periods of time. And they are very brief periods of time. So these descriptions, even though they're brief, they're very valuable because they show us that infants are busy socialising, expressing themselves, and communicating in peer groups at these given points in time. However, they don't provide information about how these capacities develop or change across longer periods of time, such as the first 2 years of life. This information is needed as it is quite likely there will be increasing numbers of infants entering early childhood education and care who will require support in acquiring the skills necessary for negotiating peer group play. This is because the aim of the United Nations Target 4.2 in the Sustainable Development Goal 4 is to ensure that all young children have access to quality early childhood development, care, and pre-primary education by the year 2030. Okay, so now my research question, therefore, was how do infants interact in groups in long day care across the first 2 years of life? To answer this question, I used a mixed methods design. So the participants were 45 infants, of which 20 were focus infants, and they were aged between 3 and 21 months of age. 4 early childhood educators from 2 long day care centres in Sydney, Australia, also took part in the study. Both long day care centres were managed by one long-standing not-for-profit organisation. One centre was located in a park in a suburban area of Sydney, and the other centre was in close to the CBD in a high-rise building. So the general characteristics of the infants. So from this table, you can see that the infants come from a variety of ethnic backgrounds and spoke languages other than English at home. I used the unit of analysis that I used was the triad, which is a third infant with an interacting infant peer dyad. The idea of the triad being a unit of analysis that originated from the work of the German sociologist George Simmel, who used it to understand the social processes that occur in adult groups. So he conceived the notion that the dyad shifts from being 2 individuals to a collective when a third person is present. So the triad is a useful unit of analysis because it can highlight the potential influence of the third infant on the relationship between the dyad and vice versa, therefore allowing for the dynamics of small peer groups to be studied. So what I did was I filmed each of the focus infants when they were the third infant in a triad every 2 to 3 months across the 19-month period, and I also noted their age in months and their gross motor behaviour at that time of filming. And the remaining 20 of the 40 infants, they had the potential to be one of the infants in the dyad. So after each cycle of filming, I interviewed the educators while showing them the video footage that I had recently collected. As the educators watched the video, I asked for their thoughts and feelings about the infant's behaviour as a way to gain new understandings about infants' interactions in groups. So during data collection, I also had to develop a reliable coding system. This coding system consisted of 2 coding schemes that could be used to observe infant interactions in a triad. So the first coding scheme defined and described the primary interactions to be studied. So these were link and linking, which are the interactions that occur between an infant peer dyad, and secondary linking, which are the interactions that occur when the third infant is in the company of the dyad. The second coding scheme that I developed consisted of a list of behaviours that were used to identify third infant's actions during secondary linking. Together, these 2 coding schemes were used to identify secondary linking in the video recordings that I collected. In a total, I collected 564 video observations of infant triads and 18 educator interviews. Now, for the analysis, the quantitative analysis, well, that involved descriptive analysis, correlation analysis, and cross-tabulation with chi-square analysis. So the descriptive analysis of the video data examined the frequency of the occurrence of third infant's behaviours. The correlation analysis using Pearson's coefficient was used to test the degree to which third infant's behaviours were associated with infant age, and cross-tabulation with chi-square analysis was used to test the degree to which third infant's behaviour were associated with gross motor ability. The quantitative analysis of the interview data, the interviews were analysed using a structural and thematic approach. Both the quantitative and the qualitative results were brought together at the end of the study and understood using concepts of infant social development and dynamics and dynamic systems theory. Now, the findings. Okay, so the frequencies and association among observed infant peer behaviours and interactions indicated that third infants were watching the infant peer dyad and what they were doing. So when looking at the table, you can see that looking behaviours were common amongst the third infants. All 20 of them looked at an infant in the dyad or both of them from afar. 19 looked at what the dyad was focused on, such as a toy. 17 shifted their gaze from one infant in the dyad to the other and back again. And 15 followed the gaze of one of the infants in the dyad to what they were looking at. Looking behaviours were also frequent, particularly this first one, the looking behaviour where infants looked at the infant in the dyad or a dyad from afar. This type of looking behaviour was observed in 86.3% of the secondary linking episodes. Now, to illustrate, here's an image, and in this slide we can see third infant Mark, who is 6 months old. He's wearing the yellow top, and he is interested. He's watching 9-month-old Ashley and 10-month-old Cameron interact by looking at each other. Now, the frequencies and the associations among observed infant peer behaviours and interactions also indicated that third infants were expressing themselves and engaging in social communications with the dyad. They were doing that by vocalising, smiling, frowning, self-soothing, and engaging in imitative and shared communicative acts with the dyad. So overall, 15 of the 20 third infants vocalised during secondary linking. So vocalising included behaviours such as squealing and gurgling and babbling, and they occurred in 12.9% of the secondary linking episodes. 13 of the infants also expressed themselves by smiling and frowning, and smiling occurred in 12.8 of the episodes, and frowning occurred in 4.6 of the secondary linking episodes. 16 infants also engaged in behaviours that can express a need for self-soothing, such as toy and blanket sucking, thumb sucking, finger sucking, that type of thing, or hand sucking. These types of behaviours occurred in 9.4% of the observations. Now, third infants imitating their peers in the dyad was also common, so being demonstrated by more than half of the infants. In addition, comparative analysis by age and gross motor ability show that the older third infants whose gross motor ability was more developed were the infants who were more likely to engage in imitative acts during secondary linking. Now, imitative behaviours are important in communication. According to the developmental psychologists Meltzoff and Marshall, it plays a key role in how infants learn about themselves and share communications within the cultural and social world that they find themselves in. Now, also, just under half of the third infants also demonstrated shared communicative acts with the infants in the triad. So third infants mutually tuned in with the infants by engaging in simultaneous and timed interactions involving bodily movements, vocalizations, and shared emotion. These interactions can appear as a joyful dancing or a rhythmically tapping objects and vocalizing together, or they can appear to be a bit more chaotic and uncoordinated, as in rough and tumble play, or three or more infants falling excitedly, or excitedly converging on a toy or a game, or three infants tumbling and falling on top of each other accidentally. Now, these interactions are known as collective intersubjective experiences, and through them, infants share feelings, thoughts, and experiences proprioceptively. That means through the body. Now, to illustrate these findings, I'm showing you this image here of 18-month-old Jenny and 19-month-old Anne, who are on the couch squealing, and they're laughing and rolling together. And now the third infant, Michael, who's got the little orange block there, he hears them squealing and he sees them laughing, and he runs to them with a big smile on his face, and he imitates their behaviour by squealing too. And actually, if you look a little bit close, with the little one in the front too with the red top is also very interested. He's watching their interaction as well. Now, these interactions are very brief. They only last for a short period of time, but they occur repeatedly and continuously throughout the childcare day. However, correlation and analysis and chi-square show only weak correlations between the behaviours and interactions. So what it means is it's suggesting that there are no fixed combinations of third infants' behaviours that emerge during secondary linking. So a child could run to a dyad, or crawl to a dyad, or reach their arm to a dyad. They could do it in many different ways. So, whilst they were interacting and communicating with the dyad, they were just doing this in a variety of ways with no particular set pattern across the first 2 years of life. Now, as a result of the third infant's behaviour, the changes in the group changed. The dynamics in the group changed. So during secondary linking, infants of all ages and stages, stages of gross motor ability, could take a pause from the interaction. And pauses involved either a brief look away or a brief movement away. So the third infant could look away or move away, or one of the infants in the dyad could look or move away. So when an infant in the dyad, for example, moved away, at times the third infant could engage that dyad, to create a new dyad. And the infant who had actually paused, when they returned to the interaction, they returned to find a new dyad, and that they are now the third infant. So in these scenarios, the infants in the triad had actually changed positions. Now, the small peer group dynamic could also end in a variety of ways as a result of the third infant's behaviour. So the third infant could just voluntarily leave the group for a variety of reasons. They might look to the educator, for example, or alternatively, their actions could break the interaction between the dyad. Okay, so the motivations. So The findings from the analysis of the interview data was really interesting because it showed that the educators had noticed that the third infants were watching the dyad, and that many of them thought that the third infants were interested in and curious about the dyad, the nature of their play, and their emotions. In particular, some educators thought that the third infants were trying to work out what was happening in the dyad. And one educator in particular noted that the third infant was trying to understand the play for possible future involvement in it. So the educator's comments suggested that third infants were learning about the relationship between the peers in the dyad. Now, educators also had noted the many ways that third infants interacted with the dyad. They primarily thought that third infants were motivated to come into the dyad because they wanted something from the interaction or from one or both of the peers in the dyad. In particular, some infant educators thought that third infants were motivated by a desire to join in and to feel the same connection that the dyad was experiencing, or were motivated by a desire to experience a sense of togetherness or belongingness with them. And for the most part, they thought that this was true, regardless of whether the third infants were predominantly focused on what the dyad were playing with or were solely attentive to one or both infants in the dyad. I mean, even when a third infant was seen to come into the dyad with his back towards his peers, the educator still interpreted this behaviour as him wanting the togetherness of the group. Likewise, the behaviour of infants who did not fully come into the infant peer dyad were also wanting to join in, but unsure how to join in or not ready to join in, or they were waiting to be invited in. So overall, the study showed that infant peer groups are open and flexible systems, and that they consist of these very fleeting group interactions and social communications, which are repeated over and over again, and which can change the dynamic of the group. That can lead to breaking up the group or shifting and changing social positions. In peer groups, third infants are wanting to learn about and be a part of the relationships between their peers. Now, that's the end of my presentation today. I hope that you enjoyed it, and thank you very much for giving me the chance to present my work. Bye for now.